right, now to our first conversation. Yeah, we're getting the OMO auction results. The Nigerian money market was stunned yesterday after the Central Bank of Nigeria walked away from its open market operation auction, rejecting all bids despite offering 600 billion naira in securities. Today we ask, why did the Central Bank turn down over 1.4 trillion naira in demand, and what does this mean for liquidity into bank rates and the broader financial market? Joining me for this conversation now, we have Akpevwe Oputu, Chief Dealer, Lotus Bank. Great to have you on the show. Good morning.
Good morning.
Fantastic. Yeah, it's great to have you. Compliments of the season. So what message is the CBN sending by rejecting bids at about 22.13%, and what does it reveal about the central bank's target rates for these tenors?
Okay, so Ladi, like you mentioned yesterday, there was an OMO auction, and we saw over 1.1 trillion in subscription, but the central bank still did not have any sale at the auction. So what I think it means for the central bank, they're actually looking out for the market liquidity, and there was an OMO maturity that came in yesterday into the system. So I think they were trying to see price discovery to see where market players were actually looking to purchase these short-term OMO securities. I recall that they had an OMO auction previously, and they sold around, it was around 21% level. So these were still around where the bids were placed. And there's an NTB auction that is expected today. So I think the market is looking out to see what the rates will cut out at the end of the NTB auction, and whatever the rate closes at, it will help give direction to the central bank on whether or not or at what levels they would like to issue the OMO at this time.
So with the intended 600 billion naira mop-up failing, what alternative tools might the CBN deploy to manage excess liquidity in the system?
There's an NTB auction that is expected to be conducted this morning. It's already ongoing. Banks are already keying in their bids. The expectation is that rates are going to go up on that NTB auction, and that's because from the budget that the federal government the budget for 2026 that was released, we've seen that there's a deficit, and the DMO is looking to borrow much more. There was a calendar that was issued just 2 weeks ago, and we saw increased borrowing from about 3.6 trillion. They are hoping to increase that to about 4.7 trillion. So expectation is that they will see more bids at the NTB auction. So I think the central bank is trying to push those demands to federal government borrowing, so customers will actually borrow directly from the federal government to support the budget for 2026. And I think the monetary policy, the central bank is doing a lot to do price stability. They are stabilizing the FX rates. They're also borrowing from banks at the interbank market. So you can actually place your excess liquidity with the central bank overnight, and you can get as high as 22.5% in short-term borrowings from the central bank. So that's basically the alternative that most banks have for now. So what we need to look at is the international community. They can do interbank placements overnight. So they're actually looking out for these OMO issuances. They are clamoring for long-term OMO issuances. And if we don't see that happen in the market, the alternative will be for them to invest their money in dollar in the FCY space. And we don't want that to happen, because that will put a lot of pressure on the FX market. We can actually see some depreciation currently on the naira. So when you don't give the internationals the opportunity to roll over their maturities, the alternative for them will be to buy dollar.
Right, now we don't need pressure on the naira right now. But let's look at some of the investor sentiment there. Why was the 140-day tenor oversubscribed while the 98-day tenor, we see that was undersubscribed? What does this say about investor preferences, risk appetite, and for local investors alike?
So So the investors are actually looking out for long-term securities because that's where they play. They match these investments to their offshore takings for FDIs that have raised funds from their countries for up to 5 years. What they actually look out for is for long-term investments that they can match those funds they've raised from their various currencies. So I think it's a clamor for long-term bills. If the rates are actually higher on the long term, you see 1.1 trillion was what was actually requested for at the long term, the March, April 28 bill. So you see those are where the concentration really is. And I know that these investors, they're actually looking for 1 year paper so they can close at these levels and take their expectation, their profit expectation upfront.
All right. So, what's your outlook for the naira this December? We know we have the just got backs. They're coming in. That should they should bring in foreign currency. That should reduce pressure on the naira, don't you think?
There's a lot of maturities that are expected into come into the system this December. There are lots of coupons that are being paid. The 2033 bond coupon will be paid in December. We have several OMO maturities, so over 4 trillion is expected to come into the system. And these internationals, they need to roll over these funds because they need to match it against those FDI funds they have raised from their countries. So we expect that this there will be a new OMO issuance to mop up this excess liquidity from the hands of banks and for the foreign investors to be able to get good yields on their investment. I know there's an NTB auction that is expected today, so we expect the rates to close higher. The yields already on those NTB papers are above 21%, which is actually good return for the investors, given that our inflation rate is at 16.02%, and we expect that the inflation figures will actually even churn out lower. So next week, we expect our new inflation figures to be released. There's a bond calendar issuance, so we expect bond issuance next week again. We also expect NTB auction to hold next week. There are OMO maturities that are coming into the system. So the central bank, the DMO, they need to do a lot to make sure that these liquidities are actually mopped out from the system. And giving these attractive yields to the foreign investors will give them confidence in the market. It will reduce the pressure from the central bank on the FX market. So we can actually see appreciation closing the year for the naira.
All right. Yeah, all eyes still on naira's performance yet today. That's for 2025. Thank you so much, Akpevwe Oputu, chief dealer at Lotus Bank. Thank you for helping us break down that OMO auction yesterday. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ladi.